The moment my neighbor's wife stepped onto my porch with trembling hands, a bruised heart, and tears shining in her eyes, I knew my quiet life was about to break open. The sun was still hanging low over the rooftops, turning the street gold, but her face looked like someone had dragged the night across it. She looked behind her once, as if afraid the whole world had followed her, then looked at me and asked the question that would change all three of our lives forever: "Can I stay here tonight?" Before I tell you what happened next, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances. Because sometimes one small act of mercy can save a life that is silently falling apart. My name is Rowan Hale, and until that afternoon, I was the kind of man neighbors forgot existed. I lived alone in a small blue house at the end of Alder Street, where the mailman waved out of habit and children rode bicycles past my fence without slowing down. I worked from home repairing old watches, which suited me because watches were honest. When something inside them broke, they stopped pretending. People were different. People could keep smiling while their whole world cracked in silence. I knew that because I had done it for years after losing my wife, Maribel, to a sudden illness that turned our bright kitchen into a room full of unopened medicine bottles and whispered prayers. Across the street lived Callan and Serafina Moore. Everyone called them the perfect couple because they owned the nicest garden, hosted summer lunches, and always appeared at neighborhood events dressed like they belonged in a magazine. Callan was loud, charming, and successful, the kind of man who shook hands too firmly and laughed a little too long. Serafina was quieter. She had gentle eyes, a careful smile, and a way of helping people without making them feel small. She once brought me soup when she heard I was sick, and another time she left a basket of lemons from her tree on my steps with a note that simply said, "For tea." I never forgot that kindness, but perfection is often just pain wearing clean clothes. Over the months, I began noticing things. Serafina stopped waving from the garden. Her bright dresses turned into plain sweaters. Callan's laughter became sharper, especially when she spoke. Once, while I trimmed my hedge in the morning, I heard glass break from their kitchen, followed by silence so heavy that even the birds seemed to stop. I told myself it was none of my business. That is what people say when they are afraid of doing the right thing. That afternoon, the sky was clear and the street smelled of fresh-cut grass. I was fixing a silver pocket watch when a hard knock struck my door. When I opened it, Serafina stood there clutching a small canvas bag. Her hair was loose, her cheek was wet, and her breathing came in short, frightened waves. She did not look dramatic. She looked exhausted, like someone who had spent years holding a door shut and finally lost the strength. Behind her, across the street, Callan's front door was wide open that I stepped aside without asking questions. She walked in slowly, as if even safety needed permission. In my kitchen, I made tea, though my hands shook badly enough that the spoon rattled against the cup. She sat at the table, staring at a patch of sunlight on the floor, and for a long time she said nothing. Then the story came out in broken pieces. The fight had started in the morning over money, then turned into accusations, then into old wounds Callan had sharpened for years. He had not struck her, she said quickly, almost too quickly, but he had trapped her in the hallway, shouted inches from her face, and told her no one would believe her if she ever spoke against him. The worst part was not the shouting. It was the fact that she had begun believing him that I wanted to be heroic, but fear moved through me first. A married woman in my house, a furious husband across the street, a neighborhood hungry for gossip, and my own quiet life suddenly standing in the path of someone else's storm. I thought of closing the door gently and telling her to call her sister, a friend, anyone else. Then I looked at her hands wrapped around the teacup, trembling like trapped birds, and I remembered the nights after Maribel died when I wished someone would knock on my door, step inside, and simply stayed at so I told Serafina she could rest in the guest room until she felt safe. I told her we would keep the curtains open and the front porch light on. I told her we would call someone she trusted. She finally looked at me then, and the gratitude in her eyes nearly broke me, because no one should be that grateful for basic decency, for the next few hours, the house held its breath. Sunlight moved across the walls. The tea went cold. Serafina called her cousin Mireia, who promised to drive over from the next town by morning. She also called a local support line, and I sat in the hallway so she could have privacy while still knowing she was not alone. Outside, children came home from school, delivery vans passed, and life continued with cruel normalcy. Then, near late afternoon, Callan appeared on the sidewalk that he did not rush at first. He walked slowly across the street, smiling like a man arriving at a barbecue. When he reached my porch, he knocked once, hard enough to shake the frame. Serafina froze. Her face drained of color. I walked to the door and opened it only halfway. Callan looked past me, already certain he owned the right to enter. His voice was smooth, but his eyes were burning. He said Serafina was confused, that they had only argued, that I was embarrassing her by keeping her there. He called me lonely. He called me desperate. He called her name with a softness that felt more dangerous than shouting. For a second, my courage shrank. I was not a fighter. I was a widower with stiff knees and a heart full of old grief. But then Serafina spoke from behind me, quietly, saying she did not want to go back with him. That one sentence changed the air. Callan's smile vanished. The man beneath it showed himself that I told him he needed to leave. My voice was not loud, but it was steady enough. He laughed once and asked if I knew what people would think. I said people could think whatever helped them sleep, but he was not coming inside. That was when Mrs. Bellamy from next door stepped onto her porch with a watering can in her hand, pretending she had not been listening. Then old Mr. Idris opened his screen door. Then two women walking dogs slowed near the curb. Callan saw witnesses blooming around him like sudden daylight. His anger had nowhere private to hide that he stepped back, adjusted his shirt, and said this was not over. Then he returned to his house and slammed the door so hard a flock of birds lifted from the wires. Serafina cried after that, not loudly, but with the terrible relief of someone who had been holding herself together too long. I did not touch her. I did not offer empty promises. I only placed a box of tissues on the table and sat nearby, letting silence be gentle instead of empty. As the sun lowered, she told me more. She told me Callan had once been kind, or at least she had believed he was. She told me how control had entered slowly, disguised as concern. First he criticized her friends, then her clothes, then her family, then the way she remembered things. By the time she realized she was disappearing, she no longer knew where the door was. Listening to her, I felt shame rise in me. Not because I had caused her pain, but because I had seen shadows and chosen not to name them. I had told myself privacy mattered more than safety. I had mistaken silence for respect. That evening, as the room filled with soft orange light, I understood that kindness is not only bringing soup or smiling across a fence. Sometimes kindness is standing in a doorway and refusing to let cruelty pass. The night itself passed quietly, mentioned only because Serafina's question had brought it into my home. She stayed in the guest room with the door unlocked and her phone beside her. I slept badly in the armchair by the front window, watching the street lamp shine on Callan's empty driveway. At dawn, sunlight entered the room like a promise. Mireia arrived before breakfast, a strong woman with silver earrings and fierce eyes. When Serafina saw her, she finally collapsed into arms that knew how to hold her, but the story did not end with escape. Real healing never ends so neatly. Over the next days, Serafina stayed with Mireia and began taking practical steps, not dramatic ones. She gathered documents. She spoke with a counselor. She wrote down dates, incidents, memories she had once been made to doubt. Callan tried calling. Then apologizing. Then blaming. Then sending flowers. Serafina did not go back. The neighborhood changed too. People who had once admired Callan's perfect lawn began admitting what they had noticed. Mrs. Bellamy confessed she had heard arguments but thought it was not her place. Mr. Idris said he had seen Serafina crying in her car once and regretted driving past. Their guilt became action. They checked on one another more. They stopped treating closed doors as excuses to ignore pain. A street that had been polite slowly became human. As for me, Serafina's arrival forced open rooms in my own heart that I had locked after Maribel died. For years, I thought grief meant staying still, preserving everything exactly as it had been. Her mug on the shelf. Her scarf by the door. Her garden tools untouched in the shed. But helping Serafina reminded me that love is not honored by becoming stone. Love is honored when it teaches you how to protect the living. One bright Saturday morning weeks later, Serafina returned to Alder Street, not to Callan's house, but to mine. She brought back the blanket she had used, washed and folded. She looked different. Not healed completely, not magically transformed, but present. Her eyes no longer searched every shadow. We sat on the porch drinking lemonade while the neighborhood moved around us. She thanked me again, and this time I told her the truth. I told her she had saved me too. She had reminded me that my door still mattered, that my life still had use, that a man could lose one love and still carry love into the world. Months passed. Callan moved away after the divorce proceedings began. His perfect house sold to a young family with twins who filled the yard with chalk drawings and plastic trucks. Serafina rented a small apartment near her cousin and started teaching art classes at a community center. Sometimes she sent photos of her students' paintings, bright messy suns and blue trees and houses with oversized doors. She said the children always painted doors bigger than windows, as if they knew safety was the most important part of a home. The last time I saw her, it was a clear spring afternoon. She visited with a small framed painting she had made herself. It showed a blue house at the end of a quiet street, sunlight spilling over the porch, the front door open just enough for someone to step inside. On the back, she had written that some doors do not just open into houses, they open back into life. I hung it in my workshop above the table where I repair watches. Every day, while tiny gears turn beneath my hands, I look at that painting and remember that people break differently than clocks. You cannot always see the damaged piece. You cannot always fix what has been done. But you can offer shelter. You can believe someone before the world demands proof. You can become the one safe place they were praying existed. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe, because your support helps stories like this reach people who may be silently waiting for a sign that they are not alone. And before the ending, I have a special request. Comment: a safe door can save a life if you believe kindness still has the power to change someone's future. In the end, Serafina did not come to my house to create scandal, temptation, or trouble. She came because she was afraid. She came because the world had become too heavy to carry alone. And I learned that sometimes the most important moment of your life will not arrive with thunder or music. It will arrive as a quiet knock on an ordinary afternoon, with someone standing on your porch, asking for safety. What you do next may become the difference between someone's ending and their beginning.